2024 Honda Prologue EV first drive. It all makes sense. The Prologue has a complicated backstory, but the short version is you're gonna like it. The story behind how and why the 2024 Honda Prologue EV came to be is complicated, and so is its future, but if you're in a hurry, all you really need to know is it's a pretty darn good vehicle. To understand where and why it shines and disappoints, though, we'll need to start at the beginning. Honda is no stranger to EVs, but the company isn't exactly on the cutting edge when it comes to electrified tech, either. Its past efforts have been sporadic and haven't sold well, and like crosstown rival Toyota, Honda bet wrong on hydrogen power, which just isn't catching on in consumer passenger vehicles. The reasons for this are complicated, but it's put the company on the back foot. Thinking pragmatically, Honda has pulled an old trick from its playbook and partnered with GM to build a Honda-badged vehicle on a GM platform. Yes, if you haven't heard, the Honda Prologue is built on GM's Ultium architecture and is, mechanically, a Chevrolet Blazer EV or Cadillac Lyriq EV underneath. Before you read too far into that, understand we're talking about the battery, motors, suspension, things like that. The bodywork, interior, software, and more are Honda's handiwork. Doing this allows Honda to get a highly competitive vehicle in the hottest segment on the road today as opposed to years from now, and it buys the company time while it fast-tracks its own EV platform for larger vehicles. Will Honda continue making the Prologue once it has its own homebrew EV platform? Only time and sales numbers will tell. Now that we know where the Prologue came from, we can understand why it is the way it is. Right up front, we must acknowledge what a great job Honda's designers have done differentiating it from its General Motors cousins. If we hadn't told you about the connection, you'd be hard-pressed to guess it. What it does explain, though, is why the Prologue's proportions are so much more rear-wheel drive than other Honda SUVs. We're not complaining, because the long, sleek shape is as attractive as the new design direction pioneered here. The straight lines, horizontal theme, and clean surfaces are just the right amount of modern and forward-thinking. They also belie just how big the Prologue is dimensionally. On the outside, it's slightly longer than the gas-powered Passport SUV and about as wide. It even offers the same ground clearance as that of its off-road styled sibling. The key difference is in the roof height, where the Prologue is a substantial 7.5 inches shorter. That's what makes it look so much longer, sleeker, and smaller when it's only two of those three things. None of that holds true for the interior, though. Unlike the Passport, the Prologue houses a big battery underneath the seats. This, plus the lower roof, means the Prologue has 3.2 fewer cubic feet of passenger space and far less cargo space as a result. It also means tall people should watch their heads when sitting in the rear seat. Although the front row has plenty of space, the sloping roof means even people of average height have less than an inch between their scalp and the ceiling in the second row, and reclining the rear seats doesn't really help. As for cargo, there's about as much space as you'd have in the compact HR-V. It's adequate but nothing to write home about. On the plus side, there's a bit more space under the cargo floor, and it's deep. On the minus side, like the Chevy and Cadillac, it has no front trunk, so you don't get any of that lockable, hidden storage some EVs offer. Speaking of Chevy, if you've been in one lately, you'll recognize some of the Prologue's key interior parts have been sourced from GM suppliers. The steering wheel is the biggest tell, with the climate control knobs and buttons, window switches, door handles, door lock buttons, and wireless phone charger also easy to spot. Here again we ask you don't get ahead of us. You may have heard about the software problems Chevy is having with the Blazer EV, particularly its new CarPlay-free infotainment system. None of that applies to the Prologue. Honda has installed its own hardware and software, and yes, it not only keeps CarPlay and Android Auto but also makes them standard and wireless to boot. On top of that, it'll project Apple Maps in the instrument cluster if you want, though frustratingly not Google Maps for those who prefer it. If you're more of a Google person, you'll be pleased to know the native Honda software is now Google-based and features Maps built in, not to mention the Google Assistant, Amazon's Alexa, and the ability to download other apps like Spotify from the Play Store. We found the interface on our pre-production Prologue test vehicle to be pretty good but prone to slight delays after a digital button is pressed. We also found Honda's effort to tidy up the menus by burying certain settings in deeper menus well-intentioned but frustrating when you need those in frequently modified settings. We feel similarly about the implementation of the Honda Sensing suite of active and passive safety features. As with all new Hondas, it's standard for the Prologue and adds a lot of value. Unfortunately, while we've liked Honda's steering assistance feature in its other products, on the Prologue there's a resistance or drag in the steering rack that's odd and off-putting. It also feels far more active than in other products, leading us to try to turn it off, only to be thwarted by a pre-production glitch that kept it on. Cadillac are equipped with GM's excellent Super Cruise semi-autonomous driving system. Set aside all the bells and whistles for a moment, and you can't help but appreciate how nicely the Prologue drives. While the underlying parts might have come from GM, Honda's tuned them into a completely different car. Whereas the Chevy feels like it's been tuned with a sporty edge and firmer ride, Honda has made no such pretensions, and the decision pays off well in the Prologue. Not only does it ride better than the Chevy, but it still handles sweetly. The Prologue sweeps around curves with a natural fluidity that's as appreciated as it is unexpected. It leans on its springs and dampers in the controlled and deliberate way the best sports cars do. Again, it doesn't encourage you to drive it like a sports car, it just makes a nice backroad drive more pleasant. Contributing to the Prologue's surprising handling chops are adequate power and excellent braking. Our test vehicle was equipped with the optional second motor and all-wheel drive, which brings total output to 288 horsepower and 333 pounds-to-foot. That's the same as the Chevy, though, likely due to tuning differences, the Prologue feels a bit less spirited. In theory, it should be good for the same 6.0-second 0 to 60 miles per hour jaunt, which feels about right. It's not quick by EV standards, but it's quick enough for a midsize SUV that isn't trying to be sporty. We didn't get to drive the Prologue's standard front-wheel drive powertrain, just as we haven't driven the front-drive Chevy, but we have the same concerns about both cars. With 212 horsepower and 236 pounds-to-foot, each is likely to be significantly slower to accelerate, and as they both feel like they're nearly 5,000 pound and up curb weights, they could seem a bit underwhelming. We'll report back when we finally get our hands on one. We're big fans of the Honda's brakes. The pedal has a pleasant firmness and responds predictably to your inputs. Better yet, there are multiple regenerative braking modes ranging from none to real one-pedal driving, and the Prologue also remembers your preference when you turn it off, so you don't have to set it before every drive. Regardless of how you're driving the 2024 Prologue, you'll be pleasantly surprised by just how quiet and peaceful its interior is. We've harped on Honda for years over interior noise, and the brand has made strides in the right direction, but the Prologue is a quantum leap. You can easily hold a quiet conversation at 80 miles per hour on the freeway in this car. As good a car as the Prologue is, its EV stats are a double-edged sword. While it's an excellent value on balance, it ships with only one battery size, 85 kilowatt-hours, rather than sticking cheaper trims with less range as many automakers do. This means most buyers get 296 miles of range with front-wheel drive and 281 miles with all-wheel drive. The fully loaded Elite trim is less efficient and goes 273 miles. It's not quite as much as a Tesla Model Y, 260 to 310 miles, but those are competitive numbers. On the other hand, Honda has derated charging to a peak speed of 150 kilowatts while the Chevy and Cadillac pull 190 kilowatts. As a result, the Prologue needs 35 minutes to charge from 20% to 80% on a fast charger, which is already uncompetitive before you consider that most automakers report 10% to 80% charging time, where the Prologue will take even longer. Honda says this was done to ensure battery longevity, which means it either knows something GM doesn't about GM's battery or it's just being conservative. Additionally, while Honda has announced it will switch to Tesla's Knox charging port, the Prologue ships today with the CCS port and will require an adapter to use Tesla superchargers once that network is open to non-Tesla vehicles. We've mentioned value several times, and charging notwithstanding, the Prologue really makes a case for itself on the economics. At $48,795 to start, it's way cheaper than its $56,715 Chevy cousin at the moment. We don't know what the front-drive Blazer EV will cost, yet, and right on top of a Tesla Model Y dual-motor long-range. Rear-drive Teslas are a few $1,000s cheaper but get a smaller battery and only 260 miles of range. For that price, you get wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, automatic dual-zone climate control, Honda sensing safety tech, heated front seats, all the built-in Google features, automatic LED headlights and high beams, the full-size instrument cluster and infotainment screens, heated mirrors, and a wireless phone charger. Oh, and 296 miles of range. From there, you can add all-wheel drive to the base X and mid-range touring models for $3,000. It's standard on the top Elite model. The Elite starts at $57,900 and Honda doesn't really do options, so unless you go wild on dealer accessories you won't break $60,000. On top of that, Honda is throwing in a handful of charging incentives to get you started. Option A gets you a home charger and a $500 credit towards the installation, $100 in EVgo public charging, and 60 kilowatt-hours of Electrify America public charging. Option B gets you a portable charger, $250 towards a home charger installation, $300 at EVgo, and 60 kilowatt-hours at Electrify America. Option C forgoes the home charging altogether and just gives you $750 at EVgo and 60 kilowatt-hours at Electrify America. Then there's the matter of tax credits. As of right now, neither the Prologue nor any of its cousins qualifies, but GM has been insistent it'll get its cars qualified this year. If it succeeds, the Prologue should qualify, as well. If you really need that credit, though, it's worth waiting until it's official. If you're in a hurry, it should qualify for the full tax credit if you lease. The Prologue story may be complicated, but the takeaway is simple: it's a great electric SUV at a very competitive price. Charging speeds could be better, which Honda could improve via an over-the-air OTA software update in the future if it wanted to, as could rear headroom, but the amount of equipment, range, and driver enjoyment you get out of every model makes up for it. A recent survey showed the Prologue is the most anticipated EV of 2024, and if that holds true, Honda has a hit on its hands.